3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is a test. I'm going to stop that beep happening with me. Turn the volume down. Yeah, that microphone is quite high. this is more than just a webinar. It's testing a new training platform as well.
Oh, amazing.
So it's quite an innovative setup, really, which you're going to be part of.
Yeah,
so this is Rosanna, by the way.
Yes, I'm Rosanna. I've been to a couple of the webinars and the CIPR webinars, so yeah, I'm very excited.
Oh, there's quite a few people on there. Saskia James, Jenny Payne, Rachel's on.
Is everybody attending by the webinar? Am I the only one to come?
You're one of the only ones, which is great.
Brilliant. Oh my God, I hope I'm
You could come on up and ask a question. nervous of is,
Oh yeah, that's fine actually.
We should probably go live though soon. So, are you guys coming up for them?
Yeah.
You joining?
For Rosanna and
It is 6 o'clock. And it's time for Crackerjack. So, do have a glass of wine. If you want, you can either do it on there. Actually, because we have got a live audience, and I want to demonstrate that.
Yeah.
I would like a question. I would like, if you want to ask a question, that would be great.
Yeah.
Because then that's the whole purpose. It's
Very
not-
curious person.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, please do, because we don't.
Ask the question through the platform and then maybe just put that hand up to say that you've asked it. Or you can invite them to read out.
Do it how you feel. Oh look, so it's on there.
I've just put it live.
Okay. Do you have to actually play it manually? It has come up on my stream, which is quite interesting.
You should register first. Most devices it will play automatically.
Yeah, it's not. I have
But
to
on
hit it.
Apple it doesn't. I don't quite know.
What you have to hit it. So if I don't turn this down, I'm going to be coming back on myself.
Yeah, pause the, make sure the video is not playing. If you're in the room, don't play the video.
Right, I feel like I've got the address right. Or maybe it's actually a paper. Oh,
You look like you're streaming
I
something
really
from
should know
earlier.
better.
That's not streaming yet.
I've got something that's asking me to log in or register. Register is taking me to the Eventbrite page. You got to take that.
Yeah, this one here. Yeah.
Is it still going? So you go through the ticket.
Alternative universe.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yes,
Oh.
I recall.
So
I
yeah,
only
you
read
read
to be able to ask questions here.
I only registered this afternoon.
Oh, right.
Because that would probably is. Well, I was sorry about this. There's a comment to say register.
Ask if people can see.
No, it's actually, I was just thinking today, I try and do like a bit of learning every day of some description, not necessarily. It must be playing. I've done today, honestly. I saw the.
That's pretty impressive.
It's the start, so you can exactly that.
Well, I'll see how later. No dive to normal. That's one of the first things as well.
Right, let's ask the first question. And let's see if we get a response. Some lovely comments coming in already. Hello, welcome. First question is, and let's see if we get a comment. We've got 3 live audience members in here. Somebody write on here, can you see me then? Can you tell me if you can see me now? That's the first thing to get this experiment underway. Sorry, we're a couple of minutes late. Oh no, that's me Yahoo. Show a new message. Yes, we can see you from Beth and Perry. That's fantastic. I can see you, says Rachel Pickin. Wyamee, I can see you, Dave. Sorry about that. Sorry, it's me. By the way, those of you that couldn't make it in person. Now, the other thing is, can you hear me okay? We've got to test vision and sound here because we're in the future. This is the future. And if you were here, you could have had one of these. Hayley's got one of those. She's got white wine. Who else have we got in the room? Evie from Ambitious PR. I know you in regulatory body. Wow, how can it? It's a global thing. The funny thing about organisations like Facebook, interestingly enough, is that they deny constantly that they are a publisher or a media organisation when they clearly are. And the reason that Facebook is resisting calls, even by our government in the UK, to be given the status of a publisher maybe not saying it's a great time to join. Make sure